I am a nerd. And as a nerd, sometimes you have to sift through countless pro football reference pages to determine if the NFL got their MVP choices correctly. And that's precisely what I did for this video. So, you've already read the title. You know what you're getting into here. Let's not waste any time. Let's get right into the criteria. Actually, one thing before I start, I've been having some audio issues with my mic, so I will be using my phone today. I hope the audio still comes through crystal clear and you guys can hear me all right, but let's get right into the criteria. First, exterior factors. All players are beneficiaries of the talent around them to an extent. So for offensive players, we'll take a look at the offensive lines up front, the talent they had around with them in the backfield, and the receiving weapons alongside them, as well as the defense backing them up on the other side. Next, the strength of schedule and their performance against top competition. Did the MVP candidate beat up on bad teams and lose to dominant ones? How did these MVP candidates fare against the best teams and the best NFL defense? Now, this may seem like a minute, very little detail in breaking down an MVP case, but competition and difficulty matters when gauging these races. Finally, possibly the most important category, and that's clutch moments. When games were coming down to the line, what did the MVP candidates do to put his team in a position to win? So for clutch moments, I considered games within one score in the fourth, or more, of course, if they let a comeback. Using these four distinct categories, it will allow us to answer the most important question of them all when judging the MVP candidates. Who drove winning on their team the most? So let's get started with this very season where Green Bay Packers quarterback Aaron Rodgers took home his third MVP award. Now, other quarterbacks Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes also received MVP votes, but I think this is a four-man race, which also includes Derrick Henry. So let's start by breaking down the MVP case for the winner, Aaron Rodgers. Rodgers was stupid efficient last season, totaling 51 touchdowns and just 7 interceptions on over 70% completion, and he helped lead the Packers to the number one ranked overall offense, a 13-3 record, and the number one seed in the NFC. A-Rod notched 4,448 total yards and combined for 71.5% of the Packers' complete number one ranked offensive output. Obviously, Rodgers was exceptional by himself and the gauge of his individual numbers, but how much help did he have around him? Well, by my personal measuring stick, I think Rodgers definitively had the most help around him of all of the MVP candidates. Up front protecting Rodgers was the number 2 ranked overall unit by PFF, and they featured All-Pro and Pro Bowl left tackle David Bakhtiari, Pro Bowl left guard Elgton Jenkins, and Pro Bowl center Corey Linsley. The Buffet Boys allowed Rodgers to eat all season long and get sacked just 22 total times on 33 attempts a game, and is the best mark by any of the fellow quarterback candidates. Now, when comparing running back help, I again think Rodgers had more help than any of the other quarterbacks in Allen and Mahomes. Alongside Rodgers in the backfield was the wrecking crew of Aaron Jones, Jamal Williams, and A.J. Dillon. The trio led the Packers to the number 8 ranked rushing attack by total yards, and they notched marks of 123 rushing yards per game and 4.8 yards per attempt. Altogether, Rodgers and the running back committee stake claim to the best red zone scoring attack in the league at 80%. On the other side of the ball, Rodgers also had substantial help, and in my eyes, the best defense of any of the other candidates. Green Bay's defense ranked top 10 in sacks, yards allowed, red zone percentage, and number 13 by points allowed. The only category Green Bay didn't quite stack up with the other candidates was in turnovers, as Green Bay only forced 18 all season long. That's 25th ranked among the rest of the league. All that being said, though, I still think Rodgers had the least help around him in arguably the most important category where it matters most for quarterbacks, and that's with the receiving core. Rodgers was paired up with one of the best red zone threats and overall receivers in the NFL in Davante Adams, who again flourished alongside Rodgers, catching 115 passes for 1,374 yards and 18 touchdowns. But outside of Adams, there wasn't a whole lot else. Tight end Robert Tonyan caught 11 touchdowns, but I attribute most of his success to playing alongside Rodgers, and only one other pass catcher on the roster totaled 600 yards on the season. That's Marquez Valdes-Scantling. He was a fair receiver, and he's a solid deep threat, but he has some of the most unreliable hands in the league, and I also have to mention Allen Lazard, who was extremely productive in his 10 games on the field, notching 451 yards and 3 touchdowns, and Aaron Jones, who was a consistent threat of the backfield, going for 47 catches, 355 yards, and 2 touchdowns. But now that we've covered stats and exterior factors, let's get into the meat and potatoes, how he fared against top competition and clutch moments. Green Bay faced 4 10-win teams in 2020 and went 2-2 in those games, winning against the Saints and Titans and losing to the Buccaneers in an OT thriller against the Colts. Now, 3 of those teams, the Saints, Buccaneers, and Colts, were top 10 defenses, and Green Bay went 1-2 in games against top 10 defenses on the year. Rodgers would carve up New Orleans and Indianapolis as he went for 619 yards and 6 touchdowns to just 1 turnover, but he put up a complete dud against Tampa Bay as he totaled just 174 yards with no touchdowns and 2 interceptions. So in stats in 3 games against top 10 defenses, Rodgers totaled 61% completion percentage with 793 yards. That's 264 per game with 6 touchdowns and 3 turnovers. Now, in clutch moments on the season, Rodgers had 4 games that I considered versus the Saints, Vikings, Jaguars, and Colts. For clutch moments, I am just going to go through all of the games and what happened during them, briefly summarizing and then giving stats here at the end. So in Week 3 versus the Saints, the Packers were knotted up at 27 heading into the fourth quarter after Breeze and Kamara connected on a 52-yard touchdown. On the following drive, Rodgers would go 2 of 3 for 19 yards on the Packers' first drive of the fourth, but would help break the tie with a Mason Crosby field goal after Zadarius Smith recovered a Taysom Hill fumble. The Packers' defense would follow the field goal up with a forced 3-and-out, and the offense would capitalize with a 64-yard drive capped off with a Rodgers to Tonyan 1-yard touchdown to extend the lead to 10 and close it out. So in clutch moments versus the Saints, a 3-drive sample size, the Packers got the win, and Rodgers went 8 of 11 for 64 yards and a touchdown. Next close game, Week 8 versus the Vikings. They trailed 14-28 entering the fourth quarter. The Packers would get 2 quick first downs on the first drive of the fourth, but they would turn the ball over on downs at the Minnesota 32 with an incompletion to Robert Tonyan. The Green Bay defense would luckily force a 3-and-out, and the Packers would have one more chance to cut the lead. Rodgers would have a 74-yard drive capped off with a 7-yard Davante Adams touchdown and a Jamal Williams 2-point conversion to give the Packers just a glimmer of hope. The offense would get the ball back with 47 seconds left and no timeouts as Rodgers would lead the Packers to the Minnesota 41 in hopes of a late game Rodgers, a little bit of that Hail Mary magic. Alas, he would be sacked and fumbled on the last play of the game, and the Vikings would give the Packers a heartbreaking loss 28-22. So in clutch moments versus the Vikings, a 3-drive sample size and a loss, Rodgers went 12 of 17 for 135 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 fumble lost. Week 10 versus the Jaguars, the Packers trailed 20-17 after the Jaguars' first possession of the fourth netted a tie-breaking Caleb McLaughlin field goal. However, Rodgers and the offense would immediately answer with a house call, a 75-yard touchdown drive capped off with a Davante Adams touchdown. After that, the Packers' defense stood tall, and the offense would run out the clock. So in clutch moments versus the Jaguars, 1 drive and a victory, Rodgers went 4 of 5 for 74 yards and a touchdown. Week 11 versus the Colts, the Packers once led 28-14 at the half, but the Colts would storm back in the second half to tie the game up at 28-all to start the fourth. So after they tied the game up with a Rodrigo Blankenship field goal, the Colts immediately got the ball back after a fumble on the kickoff, and they would take their first lead of the game with another Rodrigo Blankenship field goal to take the lead 31-28. The Packers offense would take back over, and Rodgers would go 6 of 7 for 52 yards, but he would turn the ball back over to Indianapolis off of an incompletion to Aaron Jones on 4th and 1. Alas, once more the Packers defense would stand tall and give Rodgers a chance to tie it up or put it away with 1:33 left. Rodgers would give the Packers a chance to win this game. They'd get all the way down to the Indianapolis 8 off of big chunk plays, but ultimately would kick a 26-yard field goal to force OT. The Packers received the ball in overtime and looked to march once more down the field, but Marquez Valdes-Scantling immediately coughed it back up on a screen pass, and the Colts would rely on Blankenship once more to seal the victory. So in clutch moments in the loss versus the Colts, 2 drives and 2 additional plays in overtime, Rodgers would go 12 of 16 for 145 yards, and they had 2 bad fumbles from his teammates. In those 4 games, the Packers went 2 of 2, and Rodgers had 9 offensive drives where he went 36 of 49. That is a 73.4 completion percentage with 418 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a turnover. Now, this concludes Rodgers' case for the time being, so let's get into our next candidate of 2020, and that's Patrick Mahomes. Mahomes was crazy, stupid efficient just like Rodgers all season long, throwing for 40 touchdowns and just 8 turnovers on over 66% completion while leading the Chiefs to the number 1 seed in the AFC and the best record in the entire NFL. Now, while the raw completion percentage, touchdown, and turnover numbers may not be as impressive as Rodgers, the yardage total certainly is. Mahomes amassed 5,048 total yards in just 15 games played. That's 337 yards per game, and Mahomes accounted for 79% of the Chiefs' number 6 ranked overall offense. That's a mark higher than any of the other MVP candidates. So when looking at exterior help around Mahomes, I think it's clear that Rodgers had more help overall. The only category where I would say this isn't true is the receiving core. Mahomes had 2 all-pro receiving talents in Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. I mean, do I need to say anything else? Kelce is arguably the best tight end in football, one of the most reliable targets in the game, as well as a consistent red zone threat. Hill is the fastest, most explosive weapon in football today. He's got an unbelievable ability to get open, and he's a threat to make a house call anytime he touches the rock. Now, Hardman, Robinson, and Watkins were inconsistent big play threats, but comparable, or I'd say they're maybe even better than the depth in Green Bay. I mean, again, though, when you have 2 talents the caliber of Kelce and Hill, this really isn't a close race. Mahomes definitively had the most help in the receiving realm of any of the quarterback candidates. Outside of receiving, though, the help around Mahomes was above average to average at best. In the backfield, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Le'Veon Bell, and Darrell Williams helped the Chiefs to the number 16 rushing attack in the NFL and totaled 96.5 rushing yards per game with 4.5 yards per attempt. Now, along with Mahomes, the group secured the number 8 best red zone scoring percentage in the NFL with 63.3%. So compared to the other quarterback candidates, I would say Mahomes had unquestionably more help than Josh Allen, but less help than Aaron Rodgers. On the offensive line front, the Chiefs' line was good, when healthy, but instability plagued the Kansas City line throughout the season as 9 different linemen saw action up front for the Chiefs after tackle Mitchell Schwartz went down with a back injury in Week 6. Still, Mahomes was sacked just 22 times on 39 attempts a game, but the pass blocking was better than the sack total suggests as Mahomes' style of play put the O-line in precarious positions all season long. On the defensive side of the ball, the Chiefs' defense was really solid, ranking top 10 in points allowed and turnovers forced, forcing 22 in Mahomes' 15 games, but the defense was league average by sacks and yards allowed and had the literal worst red zone defense of anybody in the entire NFL. So, in my opinion, the Chiefs had the worst defense of the quarterback candidates, but they were still worse than the Titans' abysmal defense. Let's get into how Mahomes fared in big moments and against stiff competition. And I think it's in this category where Mahomes' MVP case is bolstered even more. Kansas City faced 5 teams that had 10 or more wins, and they were victorious in every single game, beating the Ravens, Bills, Buccaneers, Dolphins, and Saints. And against top 10 defenses, Mahomes was similarly dominant. Mahomes and the Chiefs faced 5 top 10 defenses, and they beat all of them, as Mahomes totaled 1,858 yards, 13 touchdowns to just 5 turnovers on over 68% completion. As for clutch moments for Mahomes, I looked at 5 games against the Chargers, Panthers, Falcons, and both games against the Raiders. So let's get started with Week 2 versus the Chargers. The Chiefs trailed 9-17 heading into the fourth quarter, but Mahomes would quickly tie the game up with a 54-yard touchdown to Tyreek Hill and a 2-point conversion to Mecole Hardman. Herbert and the Chargers offense reclaimed the lead with a 10-minute-long drive that was capped off with a 23-yard Michael Badgley field goal, but Mahomes wouldn't let the Chiefs go out that easily. He engineered an 85-yard, 2-minute drill where he officially went 7 of 10 for 85 yards and put Harrison Butker in position to kick a game-tying 30-yard field goal and send the game to OT. But it's important to note that Mahomes actually totaled 118 yards on this drive, but they had 3 plays called back due to penalties. So the Chargers would get the ball first in OT, but the Chiefs' defense forced a 3-and-out, and they set up Mahomes to close out the game. Mahomes would go 4 of 6 for 28 yards on the final drive, as Butker would boot the game-winning 58-yard field goal. So, in clutch moments versus the Chargers, a 3-drive sample size and a victory, Mahomes went 15 of 21 for 202 total yards and a touchdown. Week 5 versus the Raiders, one of the best games of the year. Both teams were tied up at 24 going into the fourth, but the Raiders would quickly jump out to a 30-24 lead off of a Josh Jacobs touchdown. Mahomes and the offense would follow up that scoring drive with a 3-and-out on their first fourth quarter possession, and the Raiders would capitalize with a 5-minute drive that ended with a field goal to put them up 33-24. Mahomes and company would take over again, but be forced quickly into a 4th down, where Mahomes would throw an interception that was returned to the 2-yard line by Jeff Heath. Jacobs would punch in another 2-yard touchdown to give the Raiders a 16-point lead as Kansas City took over once more. Mahomes would lead the Chiefs on a 75-yard touchdown drive, but it was too little too late as Vegas would run out the clock and hand Mahomes his only loss of the year. So in clutch moments in the loss versus the Raiders, a 3-drive sample size, again, a loss, Mahomes went 6 of 12 for 82 yards with 1 touchdown and 1 interception. Week 9 versus the Panthers, Carolina initially trailed 20-17 heading into the fourth, but Mahomes and Hill would connect on back-to-back deep passes to score and give Kansas City a 9-point lead. Teddy Bridgewater would score on a rushing touchdown on the ensuing possession to cut the lead down, but the scoring barrage wasn't done just yet. Both teams would trade additional touchdowns, Mahomes to Hill on a 2-yard pass and McCaffrey on a 1-yard run, as Panthers kicker Joey Sly would ultimately miss a game-winning 67-yard field goal. So in clutch moments in the win versus the Panthers, 3 drives, Mahomes went 7 of 11 for 95 yards and 2 touchdowns. In Week 10 versus the Raiders, another shootout, Derek Carr connected with Darren Waller on a 3-yard touchdown to take the lead 24-21, but Mahomes and the Chiefs offense would immediately respond with a 5-minute drive that ended in a Le'Veon Bell rushing touchdown. The teams would trade touchdowns once more before Derek Carr would throw a game-losing interception, and the Chiefs would kneel out the clock to seal a 35-31 victory. In clutch moments in this win versus the Raiders, 3 drives, Mahomes went 13 of 16 for 148 yards and a touchdown. Week 16 versus the Falcons, the Chiefs earned their first lead of the game 10-7 after a Harrison Butker field goal kicked off the fourth quarter, but they lose the lead with a little under 5 minutes left after Matt Ryan connected with Laquan Treadwell for a go-ahead TD. Mahomes would take the one-drive opportunity and go 4 of 6 for 79 yards and connect on Demarcus Robinson for their go-ahead TD. Ryan would lead the Falcons down the field to the Chiefs' 21, but Younghoe Koo would miss the potential game-tying field goal. So in the win versus the Falcons, one drive, Mahomes went 4 of 6 for 79 yards and a touchdown. So that wraps up all of Mahomes' clutch moments, and on the season, 13 drives, Mahomes would go 4-1 in clutch moments, going 45 of 66, that's 68.2 completion percentage, with 606 yards, 6 touchdowns, and 1 turnover. Now let's run down the case for our final QB candidate, Josh Allen. Allen led the Bills to the number 2 ranked overall offense, a 13-3 record, and was a Hail Murray away from leading the Bills to 14-2 record on the year. Allen posted similar yardage totals to Mahomes, going for 4,965 yards, and accounting for 78.2% of the Bills' number 2 offense. Now, in the stats category is wherein lies the biggest knock on Allen's MVP campaign, the 16 turnovers mark. Allen certainly cut down on his head-scratching and overall recklessness from the year previous, but a turnover per game for an MVP is hard to justify. That being said, Allen's recklessness was warranted and necessary sometimes for Buffalo to come away with victories due to the ineptitude of the pieces around him on offense. In the backfield, Devin Singletary and Zach Moss would combine for just 81.4 rushing yards per game and 4.2 yards per attempt. Allen would also match the rest of the backfield's 8 rushing touchdowns with 8 of his own, and without Allen's rushing contributions, the Bills' rushing attack would go from 20th ranked in the league to dead last in the NFL. Allen in the backfield would combine for the 13th best red zone scoring percentage. Up front, Allen had arguably the worst offensive line of the prospective MVPs, but with the ever-moving carousel up front in Kansas City, I'd say the Bills and Chiefs lines are comparable from last season. The Buffalo line saw stability from Deion Dawkins, Mitch Morse, and Darrell Williams, but saw a rotation all year from Mike Bedger and John Feliciano, and Brian Winters and Cody Ford. The Bills' line allowed Allen to get sacked 26 times total on 36 attempts per game. That's the highest mark of any of the quarterback candidates, but I will say again, Allen's style of play attributed a few additional sacks to that total. Behind him on defense, the Bills were a good, not great defense. Buffalo ranked 14th in yards allowed, 16th in points allowed, and the unit had little to no pass rush, which was exemplified by the lack of pressure they were able to get on Patrick Mahomes in the AFC Championship game. On the year, the Bills' pass rush ranked 16th in the league with 38 sacks, and similarly to the Chiefs, Buffalo was completely lost in the red zone as they ranked 28th in red zone percentage. The only redeeming quality of the Buffalo defense was their ability to force turnovers, where they ranked 3rd in the NFL, forcing 26 on the year. Alas, I will say Allen had a lot of help in one portion of the exterior factors around him, and that's his receiving unit. Allen had the best route runner in the NFL in Stephon Diggs, who amassed a league-leading 127 catches on 1,535 yards with 8 touchdowns, and he had one of the best slot receivers in the NFL in Cole Beasley, who had 82 catches for 967 yards. Buffalo also had some sneaky depth with solid contributors in John Brown, Gabe Davis, and Isaiah McKenzie. Now, among the QB candidates, I think Allen had the second best receiving unit behind Mahomes, but still ahead of Rodgers. While the lack of help around Josh Allen certainly bolsters his MVP case, I think it's bolstered even more by his performance against top competition. The Bills had a brutal schedule as they faced 7 10-win teams, but they went 5-2 in those games. Buffalo also played 7 top 10 defenses, but Allen would lead them to a 6-1 record in those games, going for 1,942 yards with 21 touchdowns to just 6 turnovers. Now, as for clutch moments, I took a look at 4 games for Allen. That's versus the Dolphins, Rams, Patriots, and Cardinals. So let's get into it. Week 2 versus Miami, the Dolphins would take their first lead of the game 20-17 at the start of their fourth with a Jordan Howard rushing touchdown, but Buffalo's offense would answer with back-to-back scoring drives as Allen went 6 of 8 for 145 yards and 2 touchdowns. Fitzpatrick would lead a late scoring drive with Buffalo would kneel out the clock and go on to win 31-28. Week 3 versus the Rams. At one point, Buffalo led this game 28-3, but the Rams would storm back in the fourth, scoring 29 unanswered points to reclaim the lead 32-28. Sadly for LA, the lead was short-lived as Allen led the Bills downfield, going 6 of 9 with 85 yards and connecting with Tyler Kroft for the game-winning touchdown. Week 8 versus New England, they were tied at 14 heading into the fourth. The running backs did most of the work on the ground in Buffalo's first fourth-quarter drive, but they allowed Josh Allen to scamper in a 2-yard score to go up 21-14. Newton and company would tie it back up at 21 on the next drive, but the Bills' offense would get down to the New England 10 to kick the eventual game-winning field goal with 4 minutes left. Newton would fumble on the ensuing drive, and the Bills would kneel out the clock for the win. So in the victory versus the Patriots, 2 drives, Allen went 3 of 4 for 41 yards and a touchdown. Week 10 versus Arizona, the Cardinals led 26-23 heading into the fourth quarter, where both offenses would be pretty stagnant until the very end. Allen would connect with Stephon Diggs on a 21-yard touchdown to take a 30-26 lead with 34 seconds left, but Kyler Murray and the Cardinals would steal the win with the now famous Hail Murray to DeAndre Hopkins. So in the loss versus the Cardinals, 4 drives, Allen went 14 of 20 for 125 yards with 1 touchdown and an interception. And that concludes his clutch moments. So on the season, 9 drives, a 3-1 record. Allen went 29 of 41 and over 70% completion percentage with 396 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 1 turnover. So now that the quarterbacks are out of the way, let's make the case for Derrick Henry. He captured the Offensive Player of the Year award, but I think he should have been in consideration for the MVP award as well. He helped lead the Titans to an 11-5 record and was also extremely efficient like the other candidates, rushing for 5.1 yards per touch and 17 touchdowns to just 2 turnovers, while becoming only the 7th player in NFL history to rush for 2,000 yards. Now, as for the pieces around him, it's hard to gauge how much Henry actually deserves credit for his success and for the success of Ryan Tannehill. Personally, I think it's a mutually beneficial relationship. Yes, Ryan Tannehill is clearly a beneficiary of playing alongside Derrick. Any quarterback would be, but I think it's unfair to Tannehill to attribute all of his success to solely playing alongside Henry. He's an efficient, accurate, West Coast game manager who has just been maximized by the dominant ground game, but to say that Henry didn't benefit from playing alongside Tannehill as well is kind of preposterous. Just for Henry's success, the water is similarly murky. He's an all-time back and rushing talent, but he's played behind one of the best run-blocking units in football. Now, he deserves ample credit for his own success. It's important to note that Tennessee's best O-lineman, Taylor Lewan, went down with a torn ACL against the Texans, but again, you need those guys up front to create those lanes to run through. So, on the other side of the football, Henry had to pick up for one of the league's worst units. The Titans ranked 24th in points allowed, 28th in yards allowed, and 30th in red zone percentage, and 30th in sacks. I mean, absolutely disgusting. They were good at forcing turnovers, as they ranked 7th in the league, forcing 23, but they were basically abysmal in every other category. Henry definitively had to pick up the worst defense of any of the candidates, but he also had the most help in the backfield, as Tannehill was an excellent quarterback last year. As for the big games, Tennessee was pretty average against 10-win teams, going 3-3, and against top 10 defenses, going 2-2. However, in 4 games against top 10 defenses, Henry dominated, totaling 498 yards on 100 touches with 5 touchdowns and 0 turnovers. As for clutch moments, Henry's case is also drastically improved by looking at the close games. I took a look at 6 for Henry: the Broncos, Jaguars, Vikings, Ravens, and 2 games versus the Texans. Week 1, in the win versus the Broncos, they were trailing with 9 minutes left in the fourth after a Melvin Gordon touchdown, but they would go on to win with a Stephen Gostkowski 25-yard field goal with 17 seconds left. In the win versus the Broncos, we saw limited action of Henry. In 3 drives, he had 6 touches for 32 yards. Week 2 versus the Jaguars, Minshew and Thompson connected on a 14-yard touchdown to tie the game at 30 all midway through the fourth, but Stephen Gostkowski would kick another late-game field goal to secure the victory for Tennessee. In the win versus the Jaguars, 2 drives, Henry had 5 touches for 25 yards. Week 3 in the win versus the Vikings. In similar fashion to the first 2 weeks of the season, the Titans would lose a lead in the fourth quarter and have to rely on the leg of Stephen Gostkowski to kick them back in the game. Kyle Rudolph and Kirk Cousins connected on a 3-yard touchdown to take the lead, but Gostkowski would sink 2 late field goals to give the Titans the win, 31-30. In the win versus the Vikings, 2 drives, Henry had 6 touches for 38 yards. Week 5 in the win versus the Texans, Houston led 23-21 entering the fourth quarter, but Derrick Henry would torch the Texans defense for a 94-yard touchdown on his first touch of the fourth quarter. Titans defense would surrender yet another lead as Deshaun Watson connected with Will Fuller on a 43-yard touchdown, and then another touchdown to Brandon Cooks on Houston's following drive, but the Titans offense would tie the game up at 36 and force OT with an A.J. Brown TD, while Henry put the game away in overtime with a 5-yard touchdown. In the win versus the Texans, 3 drives, Henry had 4 touches for 104 yards and 2 touchdowns. Week 11 in the win versus Baltimore, the Ravens would lead 21-13 heading into the fourth quarter, but a Stephen Gostkowski field goal and a Hill touchdown and 2-point conversion would help force OT and set up Derrick Henry for a game-winning overtime touchdown run. In the 30-24 win versus the Ravens, 3 drives, Henry had 17 touchdowns for 89 yards and 1 touchdown. Week 17 in the win versus the Texans, Houston reclaimed the lead with 10 minutes to go in the fourth, but Tannehill would run in a touchdown on the following drive, and Sam Sloman would kick a game-winning field goal as time expired. So in the 41-38 win versus the Texans, 2 drives, Henry had 8 touches for 27 yards and no touchdowns. Now, he didn't have a huge impact in the clutch moments versus Houston, but he was imperative to keeping it close, as on the game he totaled 250 yards and 2 TDs. So, in clutch moments on the season, again, something that bolsters his case extremely well, 15 drives, 6 games, Titans were undefeated in all of them. They went 6-0 in clutch moments on the year, and Henry had 41 touches for 315 yards. That's 7.7 yards per touch with 3 TDs. So, after evaluating all of these cases, do I think the NFL got the pick wrong? I would have given the award to Mahomes over Rodgers. Rodgers was as close to perfect as a quarterback could be, but Mahomes never had as horrendous a game as Rodgers did against the Buccaneers, and really only had one subpar game all season long in his sole loss on the season versus the Raiders. Both QBs only deserve to wear one loss on the year. Again, Mahomes versus the Raiders, Rodgers versus the Buccaneers. And while I won't irrationally hold the Colts' loss against Rodgers, I will hold the Vikings' loss against him, as he had an opportunity to close that one out. Rodgers was good, not great in clutch moments on the year, and I think Mahomes objectively performed better in clutch moments while playing a tougher schedule with less help around him than Rodgers. And both Mahomes and Allen also had to be genuine rushing engines for their teams to be successful, which also factored into the Mahomes case. As for Allen falling to 3 in my re-rank, his success as a rusher, performance against tough competition, performance in clutch moments, and lack of help is super similar to Mahomes. But I have to hold his recklessness against him. As for Henry, I have him 4th. He had a tremendously efficient season, performed extremely well in clutch moments, and had to pick up for the worst defense of any of the candidates, but was behind one of the best run-blocking units and had a damn good quarterback alongside him. At the end of the day, though, I just don't think a running back's value can quite compare to a QB's. So that does it for my rankings, but what do you think? Given the numbers in clutch moments, who do you think deserved to win the 2020 NFL MVP award? Be sure to let me know down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed watching this video, I encourage you to like and subscribe, as well as check out the numerous videos that Carson has uploaded on the channel. You can also check out the Nerd Sesh podcast, available on all podcasting platforms, where we do heavy basketball analysis, in-depth coverage of the NBA, and some football content. And be sure to follow Nerd Sesh on Instagram at Nerd Sesh and on Twitter at Nerd_Sesh to stay up to date on all of our content. Take care, guys.